Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg. Today, I'm really excited because I get to chat with somebody I've admired for many years, and that's Dr. Jules Pretty, who is a researcher, author, and emeritus professor of environment and society at the University of Essex. He writes about nature, climate, and people, creating stories about hope that lead to change. And again, Jules, you're one of my favorites. Thank you for everything that you do, and really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Danny. Well, the food tank is one of the leading platforms in the world for linking people together with each other, with others on the journey. I think the work you do over many years is fantastic. So it's great to be here to have a chat. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you again. So I want to talk about, you've done so many things throughout your career, but I want to talk about your new YouTube channel, which is Story for Climate and Nature Recovery. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yes. The idea behind it really was how do we weave together these kind of thoughts about what story is, together with hope, as you just mentioned, but also about transformation, about
Hmm.
journeys that change the landscape, change systems, and change us.
Right.
All good story has got kind of transformation at the heart of it. Um, and transformations are hard. I mean, they're difficult. They're psychologically difficult, physically difficult to do.
Right.
And the backdrop is the crises of climate and nature and social inequality and myriad other ones as well that we could talk about. And I guess the exam question would be, how do we talk about these things without increasing anxiety and stress?
Right.
Because there's so much kind of assailing people, and we know much more about the problems of the world than we did even 10 years ago on
Right.
average. And sometimes that doesn't lead to an increased sense that we should act. The kind of that anxiety and stress weighs on people, and we're not quite sure what we should do about it. So the
Right.
the idea of the channel is how do we turn that kind of talk and thinking into agency, the
Right.
sense, the capacity that we can do something different, we individuals or groups of people. So it's more than just action. It's agency. It's about the journey that we go on, and really about how do we acquire that sort of inspiration, that feeling that we're not alone, that other people
Mhm.
have been doing this, that actually humanity's been doing this forever, really, since we started writing and telling stories. They're all about kind of those sorts of transformations and having within them a kind of DNA about well, this is the sort of lesson that you could draw from it. So it's early days, but I do feel that thinking about the structure of story and the way it plays out gives us an opportunity to tackle old problems as well as kind of emergent new ones that we all currently face.
Right. Right. Jules, often when we're talking about the climate crisis, we talk about, as you said, transforming landscapes, transforming practices. But what you said about transforming ourselves psychologically, that's something we don't hear a lot. And I'm wondering if we can dig more into that part of it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think if you if we reflect upon um, traditions of story which occur in every single human culture, and in every human culture that has recorded them in the past, the very first the very first written story, or at least the one that survives to this day, is the Epic of Gilgamesh from 5,000 years ago, 3,000 BCE, in which the king thinks he has everything and realizes he doesn't. He goes off on this journey which just fails. One thing after another just gets worse. He falls in a hole, basically, and he doesn't know how to get out of it. And eventually he comes back, and realizes he just had the kind of wrong approach in the first place. The kind
Right.
of psychological change shifted in what some people call the hero's journey, but it's not always about heroes. It's about the change that we go through in life. And he comes back and he turns Uruk into a kind of blue-green Eden takes the irrigation water, channels it for the people, creates orchards and gardens and wild areas of marshland and a flat heterarchy for people to work in and open common places. And it's all there written in cuneiform, the very first place that invented writing. And so we can track 4 or 5 thousand years, all sorts of examples of people kind of struggling
Yeah.
to realize what they can do and then finding a way through it. And we see that in lots of contemporary story as well. That's a kind of common pattern. But what, as you just alluded to, the trick is going to be how we tell that in a way that allows us to address change in climate, nature, food systems, which we all know need to change, and we have an idea what they might look like, but there's quite often a gap of getting from this place to that place,
Right.
which centers on our realization of possibility, our imagination. People often scoff at imagination. Children are sometimes told, "You're imagining things,"
Mm,
as a sort of put down. You say, "Hang on a
right.
minute, isn't that a really good thing?"
Right.
Imagining things, that's creative, marvelous. Imagine things because that's going to give us at least a sense of a range of possibilities in front of us. And I guess I would conclude by saying good story really does three things. It maps multiple paths, so not one path, creates the agency that we were just talking about, but brings people together because without the social capital, without the togetherness, it is hard, and we need to rely on other people to lean upon and to help and to go on the journey with us. And then I mean, you can break one match, but you can't break a box of matches. There's that
Right.
that story about the sticks on the camel's back, but lots of them give you strength, and so that's what story is really all about, I think.
Absolutely. Gosh, that is so eloquently said. And I want to come back to this idea of bringing people together and how we do that through story. But Jules, there's such a tendency right now in what people think of. A lot of people consider what we're dealing with right now a very dark time, and there's a tendency for stories to be dystopian. To imagine, as you said, to imagine, the worst, to imagine the dark side, to imagine a world that is not where we've, helped restore, recover nature, where we've, been able to find ways to solve the climate crisis, et cetera. How do we, and I think as humans we tend to go towards that side, that dystopian side. You're suggesting something very different. And, what are the mechanics of getting to the bright side?
Yeah, I think what you've hit upon, I think that's a question for this age that we all face. I mean, it is a kind of central point of choice, really. I found myself in the last 5 years in public talks. I give a lot of talks to local groups about climate and nature recovery in various ways. And I found myself just completely stopping talking about bad stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen people in the audience blank a bit and go a bit kind of like, oh, crikey, really? Did we come out to hear this evening? I know enough about this. And there's a hint there, there's a clue, which is that in most industrialized countries and most countries in transition, formerly called developing countries of various sorts, the proportion of the population that knows that climate change is real and secondly knows it's caused by humans has gone up from a mid 50% in 2019 pre-COVID
Hmm.
to mid 80%. Highest in the world is Italy, 92%. So we know that this is real, this thing called climate change, and we know it's caused by humans. And that is a really big kind of shift. That's a
Yeah.
big kind of threshold that we've crossed. And but that's the very thing that brings the anxiety and the stress because there's a gap. You say, oh, right, well, what do we do about it now?
Right.
And that's where we kind of need that sort of stepping in, I think, into that space to help populate it with ideas and a sense of agency. And that I think is the big change that's happened at the moment. And the choice I would say is think we have to choose our moments when we talk about the bad stuff really carefully, um, because it's scary,
Hmm.
and scaring people may not be the main aim, actually. It's interesting. I mean, we're all tempted. One is tempted by, did you see this? Crikey, did you see that landslide or that melting glacier?
Right.
Or did you see this? You know, we're kind of tempted towards those bad things because they are, they change us when we see
Mhm.
them and hear about them. But I think we have to decide, okay, there's a place for that. Maybe we're not quite sure what the place is. Maybe it's in science where we're analyzing ice sheets and ocean currents and so forth. But when it comes to public engagement, I think we stop talking about that largely. And just be perfectly honest. I mean, I say to people, I think you know about this, so I'm not going to talk about the bad stuff. I am going to talk about what we do about it. I'm just
Yeah.
going to make an assumption there. And maybe not everyone gets it, but that's fine. You only need 80%. The 80-20 rule is kind of pretty clear. You get 80% of a population and whole systems change. You know, that you don't
Yeah.
need to, never need to aim for 100%, aim for 80. And then you get tipping points and shifts, that follow on from that. So I think there it is a matter of choice, but I think one needs to recognize that problem in the first place, that it's tempting, but the bad stuff scares people, and maybe scaring them is not the right thing to do. Maybe
Yeah.
people are scared enough, actually, perhaps.
Yeah, I think we're all scared enough right now. We do need those stories of hope. You mentioned, bringing people together, and if we have that 80%, we can really shift and transform not only how we're thinking, but what happens to the environment, to nature, and, what happens to all of us. How do you bring those people together in a way, I mean, again, in a way that doesn't scare them, but makes them feel hopeful and maybe joyous?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think one could focus on two things: places and rituals. So, I mean, really, places is what Food Tank is all about, isn't it? That's what you celebrate, particular kind of creations and ideas that emerge in different places. So I think we start with saying the people who live in this village or in this neighborhood, in this town, in this kind of community, what can we do to get people working together on something of common interest? Noting that we never, as we just said, we don't need 100%. We
Right.
just need enough people to make it feel as though there's kind of energy coming along in particular places. So I think place-based is the central, part of part one. Part two then is, I think, to create rituals and ceremonies
Hmm.
and celebrations, and as you said, moments of joy and laughter, and all kinds of um, things that make people feel as though we have a common experience. I remember somebody saying to me, this was pre-COVID, so this is a kind of lesson from this. They said that's really interesting, all of that. There's not much laughter, is there?
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, yeah, that's a really good point. How are we going to make people smile? How are we going to kind of say, well, yeah, it's 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 difficult, but this is what we can do about it.
Yeah.
Bertolt Brecht in 1939, the German playwright, librettist, asked a question. He said, in the dark times, will there be singing? And he said, yes, there will also be singing about the dark times.
Yeah.
Um, and the singing was the song and the saga and the celebration, the mutual kind of doing stuff together. When things are tough, that's when you need to get people together to sing,
Yeah.
to kind of use that sort of metaphor. Um, and I mean, this happened once with Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia in the late 1980s. The singing revolution in Estonia emerged when people started coming together in public spaces in Tallinn and in the smaller towns. And they started just singing songs that were popular, but not anti-government, because if they
Uh-huh.
did that, they were going to get arrested.
Right.
So the soldiers could do nothing. They just kind of they were part of Russia as at the time. and they started singing, and people started coming to events and creating numbers. And then, of course, in the side, they started talking about doing other things. And this eventually merged into this amazing singing wall that was created across the three countries,
Wow.
650 kilometers long, with people holding hands, 600 kilometers long, holding hands and singing. And that just changed the whole country. I mean, that laid the foundation for the fall of the Berlin Wall and emerged. And it just happened because somebody said, let's go over there and sing.
Yeah.
I don't know who it was, but it began with an individual or a group of people. So I think that's the sort of belief that we need to have, really. That's a grand ritual, but it might be small things. It might be singing in the church, it might be in the school, it might
Yeah.
be just going to a public place, it might be taking the kids to nursery and doing something. I mean, that's the sort of collective ritual that I think is important. And then we name it, we call it a something,
Yeah.
let's call it a meeting on the first song of cuckoo in spring, celebrate something to do with
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
Or when some kind of migrant bird arrives for the first time. There are a number of countries in the northern part of the North Atlantic, the Faroes and Iceland in particular. And when the oyster catchers arrive for the first time in the spring from the wetlands of UK and southern Europe, they fly up to the north to nest. And people just love the moment when they hear the first oyster catchers. It has
Uh,
this kind of great kind of feeling. And in a sense, it feels to me like we should remember those sorts of moments about nature. It's not all functional ecosystem services and things that we can turn into dollar values. It's actually about awe and wonder and fantastic connection, because that's the bit that I
yeah.
think connects us on to do the next thing afterwards.
Absolutely. Wow. These rituals and celebrations, I feel like, are very important, especially for young people right now because of climate anxiety and, just anxiety about the state of the world. I wonder how we make sure that, the stories that you're telling on your YouTube channel are reaching those young folks.
Yes, I mean, I think there's probably in the first instance no substitute for taking people to particular places. I mean, to going, and if you're going to talk about trees, take people to trees and talk about them, and call them the standing people. That used to be the old phrase in folklore, that you called the trees the standing people. And the oldest ones are standing there for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. The bristlecone pines in the Sierra Nevada for 5,000 years. So you can tell stories about the standing people that give people a sense of deep time, and kids respond to that really well. I do know a storyteller, Anthony Nansen, who writes about taking young kids. This is kind of 6 to 9 year olds out in the way I've just described, and one of the boys says kind of indignantly to him, "You're talking about that tree as if it's alive." Um, and it was a kind of like a wonderful moment, because the kid hadn't ever thought of the tree in that kind of way, and was indignant about it. But he was clearly going through this kind of moment of realizing that something about the world has been revealed that wasn't there beforehand. So I think number one would be to get out there. I
Yeah.
know, I know young people. Well, everybody actually, everybody is consuming information online hugely, aren't they? So the second place is to try to use film and written material and pods and all sorts of other ways of communication to give that inspiration to do something. I mean, it's not just, it strikes me the challenge is not just consume this, like
Hmm.
it. That's not enough. It should be, here's something. I hope this makes you feel different, and I hope you'll do something different as a result of it. That
Right.
it will make you think about the world in some kind of slightly different way. So that's the idea of these short films on the YouTube channel, is to say we can look at this in different kinds of ways and think about the world slightly differently, and go through that little psychological transformation that you were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk about giving some, someone who's consuming a video or a story, sort of an action item, a to do. This is something I struggle with, and Food Tank struggles with. We can, have these wonderful convenings and, have amazing experts and farmers on stage. But then what do you do afterwards? What do you do after the convening? And I wonder what your suggestions are for those like that, for that to-do list.
Yeah, I think that this is a really important kind of thought about presenting people with lots of options. So avoiding the direct question, which is what what ideas are you going to give people?
Hmm.
You say, first of all, give them lots of ideas so they can choose. The tendency for expertise in all sorts of contexts, whether it's policy or science or think tanks or other kinds of areas, is our tendency is to say we've done the work, and we've analysed all the options, and here's the best option for you as a farmer or as a house builder or as a someone developing active transport or someone thinking about new woodlands or whatever it is, um, and people don't like being told what to do.
Right.
They some may agree, but some may just disagree. So one of the things that we did for two topics, one was about how to reduce your carbon profile, the average carbon footprint, and the other was about nature recovery, ideas for nature recoveries. We produced 30 ideas on a single card, which
Oh,
we
wow.
physically printed and give out to people. I've given out 10,000 of them to
Nice.
local communities here in my talks. And I say, and there are 30 ideas on here with a scoring against them. And I say, if you could just do one of these, just pick one, not 30, but one, and do
Hmm.
one this year and one next year. That's all I'm asking. So have a really low bar
Yeah.
for the ask. Don't make the bar too big. In truth, we want people to do everything, but
Sure.
actually the trick is to get them in the game, to get them
Yeah.
across the threshold, to get people to feel as though they can do something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like you're asking too much, so maybe I will do it. And so it's all about that kind of moment of transformation, the shift, the stepping across the threshold, going on the journey, leaving home, leaving the comfort of old habits and ways of doing things, and starting on something new. And we know that once people have done a couple of things, actually they're in. They're on, they're, whatever metaphor you want, they're in the game, they're on the ship, whatever you want to call it. They then start get interested in lots of other things. And you can just trust them. You don't have to
Right.
say, report back on what else. You don't say, fine, no. Give lots of options. And this is called in the literature response diversity, offer lots of options, and not one. And our problem is very often we do the work, we do the analysis, policy says we've looked at all of this stuff around nitrogen pollution, and we think this is the best option, and you've got to do it, whoever you are, farmers or somebody. And people say, no, I'm not going to do that, for
Yeah.
whatever reason. Maybe they just don't like you. Maybe they don't like your political party. Maybe they just are cross that day. Um, but if you offer lots of options and say, well, just pick one of these, then people approach it in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
So we do, and we call this 30 for 30, 30 ideas for 2030. And we do another one on nature recovery, ideas you can do in your garden and home, in your community, and how to change the whole system. Um, and and really, it's about choice. It's really kind of offering people ideas. The carbon ones are the obvious stuff. It's about food, changing food choices. It's about energy choices at home. It's about transport. It's about consumption patterns. It's about movement, transport, different ways, ideas of that. Do you fly or do you not fly? All of that kind of thing. And we're just trying to say to people, if you shift to becoming vegetarian, that saves on average zero point 0.7 tons of carbon per year per person. That's good. That's a start. But if you change your energy provider to one that only supplies renewables, the average house, I'm quoting figures that are average for Europe. They're not far off for North America as well.
Mm,
But if you shift for an average household to consuming electricity only from renewables, which you can do if you're in North and South Dakota, if you can do in parts of Texas, you can do in Vermont, for example, where systems are almost completely renewable. You can save 1.5 tons of carbon per year. So you give people a bit of data to make the choices, but then just step back and say, no, you choose. I'm just offering you the kind of options there. So
yeah.
I think it's that sort of choice space is the way to help people feel as though they have that agency. We found it to be um, tremendously kind of exciting and interesting to kind of offer those options. And and I say to people, some of the things that hurt the most I've found are people who who feel strongly about wanting to change something, but within their families they have antagonists,
Mm,
people, an older uncle very often, or a grandparent, usually male, who is kind of knocks you down from your kind of
sure.
ideas. The kind of the tension within families can be really sort of dispiriting. And what I say is, can take these ideas and put them on the kitchen table and see if you can have a conversation about it. Take them to the neighbor and see if you can have a conversation. Take them to the church or to the local women's group or to
Yeah.
whatever and see if you can use that thing as a prompt for further conversation. It's no guarantee that it works, but it's a way of hoping that you can get more people in the game, in a sort of comfortable way for them. And I think that kind of works actually.
Yeah, that's so beautiful and so practical and such a, an interesting way to talk to your family, to talk to your neighbors, to talk, to your teachers at school, whomever. Yeah, it is really exciting to think about that. Jules, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit because in one of your videos you say that any organization can tell a good story, but most aren't. And so where are we going wrong? Where are we going wrong in the food, climate, health, environmental sort of organization world?
I think it is two things. One, the one we've mentioned already, telling about transformations, talking about the journey that goes from this to this, and we would have in our mind goes from a kind of bad state to a restored, regenerated state in some sort of way, and talking about that or showing pictures or describing the journey that people go on. I think that's kind of obvious. The less obvious one and the harder one for organizations is to talk about vulnerability, to be vulnerable, to say, we tried this and you know what, it went really wrong.
Yeah.
And they almost scuppered the project. But we worked out a way around this by doing this and this and this. And we brought in some further ideas, and then it kind of got back on track again, or got onto a different track. And organizations don't like recognizing, in fact, individuals don't like
Yeah.
recognizing vulnerability in that way because it sounds like you haven't thought about it enough, or you're just prone to making mistakes. But I would say no, that's life. It's
Yeah.
complex, it's difficult, it's hard. And if you're going on a journey that you haven't been on before, well, it's there's going to be surprises there. Um, I'm kind of fond of using the this metaphor of falling in a hole and getting out of a hole. That we're in a hole, um, and we we're at the bottom. For some people, it looks really dark and hot, and the sky is way up there somewhere, and we're trying to get out of the hole. But if you climb a steep slope, the quickest way to the top is not directly up. If you go up a mountain, you go this way and this way and this way and this way, and you work your way up. And you have to be creative about the route because it
Hmm.
may not be very obvious. If you go straight up, you'll probably fall off. So the getting out of the hole requires a sort of recognition that that accepting you are vulnerable and you might make mistakes is also a space where creativity happens. So back to what we were saying about imagination and creativity, we need imagination to get out of these challenges and crises, and we need creativity. Uh, and a really good place to apply those is when things go wrong, and we
Yeah,
think, "Oh, crikey, we'd really like them all to go well, but they don't, do they?" I mean, it's
right.
it's really difficult. And the mapping of this onto people's lives, which is the key thing about the telling of story, is do the do the people who hear it, the audience or the people who watch it, do they recognize something in that kind of moment, those moments of transformation that we feel um, a kind of common cause with. You go from small school to big school. You go from big school to college. Your first job, your first date. You get married. You have children. Things go wrong. Things go right. You retire. Suddenly, it's all changed again. Have you had a rehearsal for when you retire? No. No, there's no, you're on a brand new kind of journey at this point. The only thing you've got to tell you what it's like is story, um, in each of those stages. And
Yeah,
you go to school for your first day. It's kind of exciting, but it's also truly frightening as
yeah,
well. And that's what story and transformation is about. It's about the kind of frightening state of not knowing what to do. So I would say to organizations, and I run these story masterclasses in the UK, mainly for conservation and wildlife and organizations of that sort. And this is the biggest thing that people find hard because comms teams are trained to only talk about how we created good stuff. You know, here's a good story.
yeah.
And we'll show some nice pictures of fluffy rabbits to go with it, kind of thing. And everyone will think that's lovely. But actually, I say no. Tell them about the bit that went wrong and how you created ideas and inspiration to deal with it. So I think it would be that actually.
That's great advice. There's so much power and vulnerability. Jules, I want to end on something that I think is important to acknowledge, especially for those of us who live in North America. We are living through a sort of a time where there's a lack of civility, to say the least. There's a lot of violence. And, storytelling, I think, is more important during this time than ever before. How do we, how do we start using story to talk to and listen and hear the people that we don't necessarily agree with?
Yeah. I will obviously this is a another question for the ages, isn't it? I mean, this is you've hit upon it completely there. I think a lot of story contains emotions about giving and about kindness in them. Um, and in those sorts of circumstances you've just described, the kind of the anger and the violence, it's really difficult to think about being kind of kind and to kind of give gestures. Yet that was precisely what launched the civil rights movement, is that people kind of stood up and said, right, we're just going to be kind about all of this. We're going to talk in a way that lets people kind of join the cause in some sort of way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable or difficult. It just says, this is our kind of common cause, and this is how we go about doing it. Now, I don't mean to belittle the challenge that also needs to be made politically in lots of cases, that this is really hard stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to stand up to violence. It's hard to stand up to organized, and particularly when it comes from state actors, wherever you are, in many different parts of the world, state actors are treating their people really badly.
Yeah.
Um, and the shock is to see how that has spread so rapidly in certain countries, as you've alluded to. So I think story has got a challenge. It's got kind of real work to do into this sort of space.
Yeah.
The great um, Navajo Dine storyteller from the 1960s was a man called Yellow Man, and he said, if children hear stories, they will grow up to be good people.
Mm,
If adults hear stories, they will know what to do. So he had a kind of idea that in his stories, they he was trying to change people's sense of the world and their sense
mm,
of what can happen. And I think we have to probably just start from that sort of space, and put out our arms and try to put them around people who don't feel like that should happen to them, or we might not even feel like we want to do it. It's really difficult. But in the end, that's the stuff I think that works. Um,
yeah, I completely agree with you. Thank you so much, Jules. Where can people find out more information about your YouTube channel and you?
well, they can. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Danny. Real pleasure. The YouTube channel is at Jules Pretty 58 is the YouTube channel. It's Story for Climate and Nature Recovery. And they can find out more from me on my website, julespretty.com. And there's lots of blogs and story and ideas on there as well. Um, and Yeah, the YouTube channel will be the place to start, I guess.
That's fantastic. Jules, I can't thank you enough for this. There are points in this conversation where I wanted to cry, where I wanted to smile even bigger than I was. You have really, really moved me and given me that to-do list that I needed. So thank you so much for everything you do.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. That's a lovely statement to finish. Pleasure chatting with you, Danny. Good luck. Keep up
Thank you.
the brilliant work. Thank you.
Thank you.